Welcome back, everyone. It is ExJW, and today we're going to be going over thought control. Before we get into that, just a couple of updates. First, when this video is going live, I will be in the middle of an interview with another YouTuber, so that's going to be really exciting, and I'll link to that video when it's completed. So super exciting about that. I have started work on the last in this B.I.T.E model series, and I have a couple things already in the works after that. So we got some stuff going. For now, we're going to continue on in our little B.I.T.E model series with thought control. So do Jehovah's Witnesses engage in thought control? Do they control thoughts? We've seen behaviors and information. Let's talk about thoughts. So again, we're going to the B.I.T.E model from Steve Hassan's Breaking the Bonds. And we're going to start here with number 1. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. And we're going to go to part A, adopting the group's map of reality as reality. For an example of that, we're going to start with the "you can live forever in paradise on earth, but how?" This is the Watchtower, 1983. A third requirement is that we be associated with God's channel, his organization. God has always used an organization. For example, only those in the ark in Noah's day survived the flood, and only those associated with the Christian congregation in the first century had God's favor. Similarly, Jehovah is using only one organization today to accomplish his will. To receive everlasting life in the earthly paradise, we must identify that organization and serve God as part of it. So that's a really good example of internalizing the group's doctrine. This also comes across as a threat, kind of, really, that you must be associated with God's channel. It's your responsibility to find which organization does it. And there's only one organization, and what you know, it's ours. Just like every other religion says the exact same thing. It's that implied threat, and we'll go through that with emotional control. A lot of the fear and threat start coming into play. But this is how it begins, that it's about finding God's open channel. So when Jehovah's Witnesses go and they knock on your door and you communicate with them, they will get started what's called a doorstep study. And usually what that means is they'll read a scripture with you and you'll discuss it. Be careful. Any engagement with Jehovah's Witnesses will encourage them to return. The only thing that will keep a Jehovah's Witness from returning to your door is you must utter the words. It's like a magic spell. It's really weird. But you must utter the words, "Do not call back." Like, you must make it very clear you do not want them to come back. Even if you are rude and tell them to get off your property, they will wait a certain amount of time, and then they will come back and they'll knock on your door again. For all those who are wanting people to not come back and knock on their door, that's the magical incantation. Do not call back. Like, that's how you keep the Jehovah's Witness from coming back. We'll get into it with emotional control too. Like, a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses don't want to go. As a Jehovah's Witness, I never wanted to go and knock on people's doors. I didn't want to do it. I hated it. I tend to be a bit of a hermit. So when I'm in my apartment, I lock my door. I have a shiv in my door to make it extra secure. And when I lock it, it's almost like a ritualistic thing that the door is locked, the world is on the outside, and I am not in my space. And nothing frustrates me more than when someone that I don't know comes up to my space unannounced and demands my attention. That is something that I have a real problem with. Now, to be fair, that's a bit of a personal tick, but I have a real problem with that. So when someone comes up and demands that, it makes me incredibly uncomfortable. And it made me incredibly uncomfortable knowing that I was doing that to other people, that I was going up to other people when they weren't expecting me, when it was on their weekend, when they had stuff to do, when they were in the middle of doing yard work or whatever it is that they were doing, and I was coming up unannounced and wanting them to talk about God. And I felt a lot of shame in doing that. I felt extremely hypocritical. So bear that in mind, that there are some Jehovah's Witnesses that are doing this, but they're doing it because they feel like they're forced to. And that's kind of off on a random tangent, but like I said, we'll get into that with emotional control. When it comes to adopting the group's map of reality, so I do want to go over a little bit. I've talked about it in a couple of other videos. I should make a video very specifically dedicated to the progress of events that Jehovah's Witnesses believe are going to take place, and then it will go into the new system. So just as a very brief overview, the first thing that the Jehovah's Witnesses are waiting for is they're waiting for the start of the Great Tribulation. When we're talking about David Lett, he has this very famous talking about the last days of the last days.
So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
It's a way to keep Jehovah's Witnesses in the organization because so many have fallen out. Something else we need to talk about is 1975. We're going to have to talk about that in their Stay Alive Till 75 campaign because that was a huge thing that was downplayed when I was a witness. So we'll have to go into that at some point. But they believe that once the Great Tribulation starts, that everyone who is alive that hasn't died is going to be tried and tested. And then Jesus will come down and lock Satan away in the abyss for 1,000 years. And in that time, everyone will be destroyed that is not a Jehovah's Witness. And those that have not had the opportunity to learn the Jehovah's Witness way will be resurrected. And while the world is being put back together into a paradise earth, this will all be time for people to be taught about these different teachings from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then after the 1,000 years, Satan will be released again. And he'll be doing his thing, trying to tempt people and all of that. And then only after that has been completed, it will be a relatively short period of time, whatever that's supposed to mean. Then Jesus will lock Satan and the demons away for a second time. And there they will be locked away for the rest of eternity. And then people will be given eternal life, not immortality. There's a difference between eternal life and immortality. They will be able to live into the new system, and then everything will be perfect and all of that fun stuff. So that's kind of a very, very brief overview of the beliefs of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Kind of important when it's the map of reality. That is the map that the Jehovah's Witnesses are going through. Let's go to part B. Instill black and white thinking. The black and white fallacy is something that Jehovah's Witnesses fall into a lot. For example, in their literature, we're going to go to Will You Heed Jehovah's Clear Warnings? This is from the Watchtower 2011. Satan's aim is to silence the voice of our faith, to get us to stop preaching the good news. A little aside there, the good news, that is what the Jehovah's Witnesses, when they're coming and they're talking about the hope of the resurrection, and they're talking about the kingdom of heaven that's now unreal. All of that is wrapped under good news. And the reason why they label that as good news is because eventually it's going to change. It's going to change, and it's not going to be so good news. It's going to be like a direct threat to scare people. So right now it's good news. Look at all this wonderful stuff. Don't you want to join in? And then it will turn into, you're going to die if you don't join. To that end, he tries to get us to pursue activities that waste time or that cause division among us. Notice how Paul identifies Satan's tactics. Unoccupied gadding about. I think that's gadding. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. In this age of technology, it is easy to waste our time and that of others by, for example, forwarding nonsensical or even fallacious emails. Gossipers. Harmful gossip may lead to slander, which often causes contention. Whether they realize it or not, malicious slanderers imitate Satan the devil. There's one right there. They're conflating doing anything like this in this age of technology. If you're dealing with this technology, then you're being distracted by it, that it's this tactic from Satan. And this is something we were taught over and over and over again, that this is a direct tactic of Satan, is just to waste your time. Notice that, but you know what you need to be doing is you need to be getting out in the preaching work. So we're always pushing towards that. We always pushing people to making more disciples. Meddlers in other people's affairs. It is not our right to tell others how to run their personal affairs. All such idle and troublesome behavior can distract us from the God-assigned work of kingdom preaching. If we stop actively supporting Jehovah's work, then we start following Satan. There is no middle ground. And there is the perfect example of the black and white fallacy. Let's read that last sentence again. If we stop actively supporting Jehovah's work, then we start following Satan. There is no middle ground. So if you are not actively going out in the ministry, then you are following Satan. There's no middle ground, whether you know it or not. If you are not following us and going out in the preaching work, you are an agent of Satan. It's so black and white that this is a slam dunk easy one. I don't think there's any way you can wiggle around that. That's a black and white fallacy. Since the black and white thinking is so easy to come across, let's look at another example. This is For Satan's World or God's New System. This is from You Can Live Forever in Paradise on Earth, page 208. The fact is, your way of life can be pleasing to only one of two masters. Either you are serving Jehovah God or Satan the devil. No middle ground. You're either serving one or serving the other. A principle found in the Bible helps us to appreciate this. It says, do you not know if you keep presenting yourselves as anyone as slaves to obey them, you are slaves of him because you obey him? Whom do you obey? Whose will do you do? Regardless of your answer, if you follow the unrighteous ways of the world, you cannot be serving the true God Jehovah. No middle ground. You are either serving God or the devil. Done. For C and D, we're going to combine them together because they're so close. We should just combine them. So C says, decide between good versus evil and organize people into us versus them, insider versus outsider. So we're going to go to, are you prepared for survival? This is the Watchtower, 2006. During the final period of the ancient world that perished in the flood, Noah was a faithful preacher of righteousness. In these last days of this present system of things, Jehovah's people are making known God's righteous standards and are declaring good news about the possibility of surviving into the new world. Just as Noah and his God-fearing family were preserved in the ark, survival of individuals today depends on their faith and their loyal association within the earthly part of God's universal organization. Especially the last half of that sentence at the end there. Survival of individuals today depends on their faith and their loyal association with the earthly part of Jehovah's universal organization, which of course is the Jehovah's Witnesses. So your life and your survival depends on it. It depends on it. If we remember what we read at the very beginning, our first example is talking about that God has always used an organization. For example, only those in the Ark of Noah's day survived the flood. Again, that sounds like a direct threat. That Jehovah God is only using one organization today to accomplish his will, to receive everlasting life in the paradise. We must identify that organization and serve God as part of it. So you need to be with us, and only people here are saved for salvation. No one else is. So we're going to go to number 2 here. Change person's name and identity. When it comes to changing the person's name, that's not really a thing Jehovah's Witnesses do. They don't make you change your name. But there is with the identity. For the identity, we are going to go on to put on the new personality. This is from Our Kingdom Ministry 1999. By putting on the new personality, we set ourselves apart from the world. Our way of life makes us different. We speak truth and use wholesome speech to build others up. We control our anger, bitterness, screaming, abusiveness, and all badness and replace these with righteous, godly qualities. We go beyond what is usually required of us in being forgiving. All of this is done readily from the heart. You are required to put on the new personality. You're required to change. That is a direct requirement. If you go so far as to, when you're playing video games and you get frustrated and you get angry, like gamer rage, it's pretty much a memed thing. But if you're witness doing that, you can be counseled by an elder that you have not put on the new personality. Putting on the new personality is a genuine thing. They expect you to edit parts of your personality, even if it's things that aren't necessarily bad, that most people would accused of being a bad thing. There's a member of my family who adores a particular DC character. Very much adores this DC character. And they have a lot of it in their room. This person has been talked to about having too much stuff too much decorations regarding this DC character. Because for a Jehovah's Witness, that falls into the realm of idolatry, of having idols, worshiping a false god, because you have a bunch of this stuff. And that goes directly under not putting on the new personality, because that enjoyment needs to be cut off. That needs to be adjusted, because the new personality, all of that devotion should be going to God and his organization, not to this DC character. This reverence for this DC character is not applicable to putting on the new personality. It is absolutely a real thing, and it runs deep. It really does. I do think that most Jehovah's Witnesses would kind of reel at that. Like, no, they don't make you change your identity. When I was studying and working on becoming a baptized Jehovah's Witness, I remember an elder telling me that that's one of the good things about the witnesses, is that they don't require you to make any changes in your personality. They don't require that. They allow you to be who you want to be. That is not true. Like, you are required to make changes. Moving right along, let's go to number 3 here. Use of loaded language and cliches which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into buzzwords. A lot of this is going to be just personal examples. A lot of this we have seen as we've been going through our examples of these different things through these videos. There's some words that probably have stuck out to you that have not stuck out to me just yet. These terms I'm still very used to. In one of my other videos, we did talk about being worldly and how that is completely different to the Jehovah's Witnesses than it is to pretty much everybody else. There's a major difference there. There's another one that I would like to use, wait on Jehovah. What that means is if, say you're praying and you are in a really bad situation, like you got diagnosed with cancer, you're not sure what you're supposed to do. Like a Breaking Bad situation, right? You got medical bills up the wazoo, and you're dying. You know it. You're getting worse, not better. The treatment is slowly killing you, because imagine that, chemotherapy is a poison. So that's the reason why people react so badly. And you have to weigh, is it worth it or not? Like, that's an individual thing. And you went to the elders. One of the things they'd say is you need to wait on Jehovah. Like, Jehovah will take care of it. Jehovah's going to fix it. So that's what waiting on Jehovah means. Another one is sheep and goats. So sheep is referring to those that are in the congregation. Like, we're sheep, we're being herded. The goats are the obstinate ones. And I believe this is kind of a normal one from most religions. It is used almost as a slander with the witnesses. I remember being out in service and going up to someone on a door, knocking on a door on a Saturday, and they were frustrated we were there. I mean, I don't blame them. And one of the comments that was made to me is like, well, right there, best example of a goat, right there. Scripture that talks about the sheep and the goats. It doesn't end well for the goats, we'll say that. Another one, talked about a little bit, system of things. The system of things, again, is referring to that map of reality. People that are talking about the new system, so the new system, that's the world that comes out of Armageddon. And this system of things is the life that we're living up to the Great Tribulation. That is the current system of things. And the new system of things will be that paradise on earth. Another one is Christendom. I'm pretty sure that this one is also used in most religions, that when we're talking about Christendom, that is any other religion other than Jehovah's Witnesses. All the rest of them are Christendom. Now that one is also talked about negatively, that you're a member of Christendom, of the fakes. All the fake religions, you're a member of that. And all of Christendom is serving Satan in some way. No matter if you think you're following God, Satan's misled you. He's tricked you. Only Jehovah's Witnesses are the right one. All the other ones are wrong. They're all Christendom. They're all bad. Another one we've talked a little bit is reproofing. We talked about that in the first video about behavior control, that reproofing is the punishment, right? So there's the private reproofing where the punishment and loss of privileges and all of that stuff is done just between the elders and that person in the judicial committee. Then you have public reproofing, where it's just announced to the congregation that you've been reproved, and that's it. The congregation kind of decides on whatever they think happened. Armageddon. So Armageddon, it's a little bit different than what the rest of or most religions view as Armageddon. Armageddon for the Jehovah's Witnesses is Jesus, the 144,000, the angels, and now the governing body are going to come down, and they are going to end the lives of everyone who is not a Jehovah's Witness. And even if you are a Jehovah's Witness, if you're not a good Jehovah's Witness, your life will be ended as well. There was an elder that we had a discussion about Armageddon, and he said that, that the act of Armageddon might take that fast. Just boom, just happens all at once. Within mere moments, Armageddon has happened super quick. People are dealt with, they're gone, dead, and then everything goes back, and then we recoup into the 1,000-year reign. Those are a couple of those. I don't have any experience with any other religions, so I don't know how these terms differ between other religions, but these are what they mean to Jehovah's Witnesses. Let's move on to number 4 here. Encourage only good and proper thoughts. This one is a big one. There's lots of examples, especially on talks that are meant to be just for the Jehovah's Witnesses. This is a big thing. A lot of what they lean on is they're talking about actions. So for a long time, in case no one knows it, I'm a gay man, and I tend to be pretty expressive of that it's something I don't hide. I don't feel the need to hide it. And if someone changes their opinion of me because I'm gay, like, that tells me what I need to know about you. Like, if we're friends, you find out I'm gay, now we're not friends. Okay, I don't feel like I'm really losing anything. Hi there, this is editing ExJW Rush. I go on a big long diatribe about this that isn't really appropriate for this video. The point that I'm trying to make that I never get to is that originally it was that if you were gay, you were going to be punished no matter what. When the silver Bibles for the Jehovah's Witnesses came out, only the actions that someone did, so being gay, was fine as long as you were completely celibate and never had any appropriate desires or thoughts or anything like that. But being gay was fine. You just couldn't engage at all. And if you had those thoughts, if you had those desires, and if you did those things, that is what you would be punished and condemned for. And let's get back to the video. Let's come back to number 4 about encouraging those those good thoughts. And for that, we are going to go to, are you making Jehovah's thoughts your own? This is from the study edition of the Watchtower. So again, only supposed to be for Jehovah's Witnesses, of November 2018. Of course, such freedom will not be absolute. In matters of right and wrong, meek ones will be guided by Jehovah's laws and his thinking. This will be delightful, resulting in the greatest joy and abundance of peace. Meanwhile, we can find a measure of that joy now as we make Jehovah's thoughts our own. So that's another, I guess I could go into the loaded language too. This little statement, like make Jehovah's thoughts your own, that is something that comes up a lot. Because the whole point is to look at the Bible, find God's attributes, and those are only the things you should be thinking about. Like, you should not be thinking anything else. Like, if you find an attraction to someone else, you shouldn't be thinking about that. In matters of right and wrong, meek ones will be guided by Jehovah's laws and his thinking. You need to make your mind over to his thinking. That is a clear, cut and dry example of thought control. So for 6, memories are manipulated and false memories are created. We're going to... That one, I do have an example, but I think calling it a manipulation is overkill. And false memories being created, again, I'm going to say that that's overkill. Something that at least in my experience, as I've said before, I have had several judicial committees. I have had 4. Especially in my last 2, I was very vocal with my criticism towards the elders. Not in a disrespectful way, but I got tired of being pushed down and being condescended to in some ways. So one of the things, and I'm not sure if this is what they're trained to do or not, but there is never an apology. They don't apologize. Even when you can bring them out on something, there is no apology that is ever made. One of the elders that was in my judicial committee, there's always three. One of them was brand new, like within the first week of them being appointed as an elder, they were sitting on my judicial committee. And I will never forget this. This is a book we'll have to go over at some point too. And in emotional control, I have some examples from this book, and it's called Young People Ask. So it's a book that's directly aimed at teenagers. And there's a part on homosexuality. They had opened up to a page, and I will never forget it. This elder turned this book. I mean, I'm approaching 30 at this time, and he pushes this book over to me that's meant for teenagers, and he tells me that if I read this paragraph on homosexuality, then maybe I'll discover that I'm just confused. I will never forget that as long as I live. I will never forget the amount of anger that welled up in me when someone looked me dead in the eye as a 30-year-old man and told me that I was confused. So the next judicial committee came up. I had brought that to their attention. And I said, and I wanted to say two very specific things to you. That, first of all, I am not a teenager. I'm a 30-year-old man. And I asked him, I said, are you married? He said, yes, I'm married. And I said, what if I told you that having thoughts of a physical nature with your wife is now condemned and can lead to your death? And you must only think about other men physically. And I said, is there any way that I could confuse you into thinking that? The point is that when this was all brought up, any time there was any kind of criticism, and it was stuff that the elders had done, they would always say, I'm sorry if you feel that I did this. I'm sorry if you feel I'm sorry if you believe that I did this. I'm sorry if you think that I did this. The elders never directly apologize. And I'm wondering if that's like a legal thing, if that opens them up to legality in some way by not directly apologizing. And like, I'm sorry I said that. I shouldn't have. Like, in my opinion, that's what a man does. A man, has himself held accountable for what he says. And if he says something stupid, he says, I'm sorry, I said something stupid. I apologize. That is something the elders were always very, very, very careful to do. Is sorry if you believe. Sorry if you feel that. Sorry if you interpreted. It's never a direct apology. And you see that I skipped 5 there, just because we're not going to go down that road of using the hypnotic techniques. There's at least I didn't experience any of that with Jehovah's Witnesses, so we're going to leave that one alone. We're going to go to number 7 here. Teaching thought-stopping techniques which shut down reality testing by stopping negative thoughts and allowing only positive thoughts, including denial, rationalization, justification, and wishful thinking. We're going to start there. As an example of that, we're going to go to Winning the Fight Against Depression. This is from the Awake magazine, 1987. With no more death, mourning, or outcry, gone will be the sense of tragic losses and daily emotional strains that now lead to depression. Since loving kindness, trueness, and peace will permeate dealings that people have with one another, bitter conflicts cease. As the effects of sin are removed, what great joy to be able finally to measure up perfectly to God's standard of righteousness and have full peace within. This exciting prospect is a great incentive to keep fighting, no matter how intense depression becomes. For in God's new world, perfect humans will have gained an absolute victory over depression. What good news that is. This is something that Jehovah's Witnesses are taught multiple times, that when all of this stuff comes in, you need to focus on the new system. Dive in. What are you going to do in the new system? What are some of those things that you're going to dive into? Look at all the wonderful things that's going to happen with the new system. All of the human imperfections will be gone and everyone will be raised to perfection. It's wishful thinking. In my opinion, it does worse damage because it's better to deal with the cause of a person's depression. And again, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so take this as you will. At least I believe it's better to deal with someone's negative emotions, especially with a medical professional, instead of all this wishful thinking. Because the wishful thinking at some point will crack apart, and sometimes the depression is 10 times worse. Part B here, chanting. We're going to leave that alone. The Jehovah's Witnesses don't do any chanting. The closest thing to a chant that they do is praying, so we're going to leave that one alone. Now we're going to go to part C here, meditating. Jehovah's Witnesses meditate, but it is completely different than what most people think of when they think of meditation. We have a couple of examples. I kind of want to use an example to define of what the Jehovah's Witnesses mean by meditation. Both of these examples are going to come from meditation that is beneficial. This is from the Awake magazine 2000. We'll start with the first one here. What does meditation mean to you? If you follow the teachings of some Eastern religions, you may believe that it is something that brings greater clarity through thought or special enlightenment. Meditation practice in Buddhism encourages emptying the mind of all thought. Other forms of meditation are said to encourage filling your mind with universal truths of wisdom. The Bible's view of meditation differs from these. In what way? Consider the Bible's example of a man named Isaac, who at the age of 40 had much to meditate on. Genesis 24:36 states, Isaac was out walking in order to meditate in the field at about the falling of evening. There is no reason to assume that Isaac emptied his mind of thought, or that he was merely contemplating a vague, quote-unquote, universal truth of wisdom. Isaac likely had specific things to think about, such as his future, the loss of his mother, or who his wife was to be. He made use of some private time in the evening to meditate, likely on such vital matters. In the Bible, meditation is more than mere daydreaming. Here we get the basic example of what the meditation is. It's thinking on things. That's what it is. It's sitting and being private, having a private time, private moment, and just thinking about events, just mulling it over in your head. That's all it is. I don't know why they don't just call it that, but they gotta call it a special word, meditation. The other example we have from this same publication says, clearly we have many reasons to engage in deep, concentrated thinking about important things. It is vital to reflect on our past experiences, ponder over current matters, and thoughtfully contemplate our future. But above all, our meditation will bring us the greatest enlightenment if the thoughts center on the wisdom of our Creator, Jehovah God. It's just thinking. That's what it is. It is just thinking. Just as a weird thing that I noticed in this first example here, when I was going through this article, this little quote here, universal truths of wisdom, it came up like 4 times. I wanted to know what the witnesses were talking about because I had never heard of the universal truths of wisdom. I didn't know if it was a Buddhist thing because they had talked about it. So when I Googled it, this website came up from Richard Woods. That was the 7 Pillars of Wisdom. It is another Christian thing. It is a Christian website. It was just very bizarre to me. And I don't know if there's a connection there or what's going on. But this particular Awake article on meditation pointed this universal wisdom over and over again. So I just found that really weird and bizarre. Let's go to part D here, which is about praying. I did talk about this Young People Ask book, so we're going to go to that. We're going to go to a chapter, How Can I Control My Emotions? This one is, there's several examples. This was the pray example. So I want to show that shutting down of that negative thoughts and only allowing positive stuff in. Pray. The Bible says, throw your burden on Jehovah and he will sustain you. Never will he allow the righteous one to fall. I pray to Jehovah constantly when I'm distressed. I always feel relief after I pour my heart out to him. Supposedly, Jasmine had said this. Even when I was a witness, anytime that there was a quote that came up from somebody, I always questioned it because you can always throw in whatever you feel like. There's a little tip here. Despite the anxiety you feel, think of 3 things in your life you can be thankful for. When you pray to Jehovah, ask for help, but also express thanks for the blessings you have. Wouldn't you know it? It's kind of like there's a mental technique where You're focusing on the good things. Huh, like I've never heard that before. This is what you're supposed to do. Crowd out all that bad with the good and throw your burden on Jehovah, and because he'll never let the righteous one fall. But that also works backwards. So if you fall, it is because you are an unrighteous person. A little bit of shame there. So let's go to E, speaking in tongues. So this one was always a rough one for me. When I was in the middle of my searching for truth and I was going around to different congregations and different organizations and different religions, the speaking in tongues and falling on the ground and convulsing thing, immediate turn off. I would walk out. I walked out in the middle of several services because people would do the speaking in tongues thing that never made any sense to me. In my reading of the Bible, what I interpreted is that the speaking in tongues was the people speaking in tongues was speaking other languages, not speaking gibberish, but by the power of God being able to speak. Like all of a sudden they knew how to speak. I mean, it's not these languages, but take it for the example. Like I all of a sudden would know how to speak French. I would know how to speak German. I would know how to speak Swahili. Like it would just come about because of God's presence being active inside me. Jehovah's Witnesses don't do that, which is good because that one's always been an immediate turnoff. I actually kind of wish Jehovah's Witness did lean into this because I think a lot of people like really get weirded out by the speaking in tongues. Now we're going to go to part F here, singing or humming. We're going to look at the singing because I remember as a Jehovah's Witness, I hated the getting up and singing. I despised it. Like I'm here to study, I'm here to learn. To stop the studying so we can all stand up and sing always frustrated me. If I have hyper focus on something, the worst thing you want to do is have some sort of distraction. Like I've got the hyper focus, leave it alone. Leave it alone. Don't mess with it. I remember there was problems with people either not singing or people would use that time to get up and go to the bathroom. Like that was the break. That became a big issue. Singing is an important thing. And let's look at an example of that. We're going to look at Make a Joyful Sound. This is from the Watchtower. Again, study edition, so it's meant for Jehovah's Witnesses specifically. 2017. One factor that keeps many from singing with a full voice is fear. One factor that keeps many from singing with a full voice is fear. It may be fear of standing out or possibly sounding unpleasant to others. However, we should keep in mind that when we speak, it may be fear of standing out or possibly sounding unpleasant to others. However, we should keep in mind that when we speak, we all stumble many times. Yet that does not stop us from speaking. So why should we let our imperfect singing voices stop us from praising Jehovah in song? Singing was a very, very important thing. This particular article, the entire article really dives into how important it is and that it's part of the worship. That if you don't sing, like you're not doing the complete worshiping. And that it can be good, it can fill us with things. And when people are feeling things, it's usually when they're singing and all of that garbage stuff. If you have a moment and you want to look more into how singing is used technique-wise, read this article from the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's a real interesting one that, at least in my opinion, gives a lot of context to the reason that the singing is so important. Now let's go on to number 8 here. Rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, and constructive criticism. For that, we're going to go to do not be quickly shaken from your reason. This is from the Watchtower 1986. I wanted to include the whole thing here for context. Now, what will you do if you are confronted with apostate teaching, subtle reasonings, claiming that what you believe is one of Jehovah's Witnesses is not the truth? For example, what will you do if you receive a letter or some literature, open it and see right away that it is coming from an apostate? Will curiosity cause you to read it just to see what he has to say? You may even reason, it won't affect me. I'm too strong in the truth. And besides, if we have the truth, we have nothing to fear. The truth will stand the test. In thinking this way, some have fed their minds upon apostate teachings and have fallen prey to serious questioning and doubt. So remember the warning at 1 Corinthians 10:12. Let him that thinks he is standing beware he does not fall. If there isn't a more clear example of thought control, I don't know where to find it. This is it right here. Do not listen to any opposing views. Don't listen to it. Close your mind off to it. Do not allow your curiosity to cause you to read these things. If there's a Jehovah's Witness that's listening to this now, this is the reason why you don't. Because this apostate teaching will work its way in. Now, this is something that Lloyd Evans has said, and it has always been in the back of my mind. When I had originally seen this, because this very specific article was something that came up when I was in the middle of my deconversion, and it really struck me. In the middle there, where it says, and besides, if we have the truth, we have nothing to fear. The truth will stand the test. That always bothered me. Because in my view, if I think I know something, I have no problem hearing opposing views. But just as a personal note, I was very against abortion. And I thought that I was right for that. I thought that I had it solid. I listened to other people and listened to other experiences, read books that were contrary to my own beliefs. Because one of two things would happen. Either these opposing beliefs would show themselves as being false, thus strengthening my own belief, or it would make me realize I was believing something that wasn't necessarily true. And it would cause me to change my mind. Because I care about truth. That's why you should dive into these things. Because you don't want to waste the life that you have, the short amount of life you have, following lies. Like, even if the truth isn't necessarily the wish that you wanted, it was always better to live in a world of truth than a world of falsehood where all the good things are supposed to come later and the life that you have now isn't worth very much. That this is just a proving ground. So definitely something to think about. Now we're going to go on to 9 here. Forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy allowed. I have several examples here because I really want to go into this and let these examples speak. So the first example we're going to go to is the godly qualities of love and hate. This is from the Watchtower, 1974. Love believes all things. This is not to imply that Christians are gullible. The point is that Christians have implicit trust in their Heavenly Father. They do not question what He tells them through His written word and organization. Things work out well for those who in this trusting way go along with God's way of doing things. For example, Jehovah, and then right there, through His organization, has warned His people of the harmful effects of using tobacco, and those who heeded His advice were benefited both physically and spiritually. Perhaps some did not understand why they should not use tobacco, yet it was to their benefit to believe all things, though not completely understanding the reason why, scripturally or physically. Today we have the scriptural basis as well as the fact that the medical world recognizes the sound, practical basis from refraining from the use of tobacco. This, again, is where we're going to get into dangerous territory. Because the example that they're using is tobacco. And they're saying that we knew it, that God knew it first, especially in that first part. They do not question what He tells them through His written word and organization. Christians need to have implicit trust immediately. And then when we go down here, it says, yet it was to their benefit to believe all things, though not completely understanding the reason why. That is dangerous. Because what they're saying is that the organization told them something and the Christians needed to follow it immediately because, again, they're tying the written word of God and God Himself with the organization. So the organization said this a long time ago. And at the time, people didn't understand why. Why should we do that? Why should we not? But you benefited from it. And if not, you got sick and it was a punishment. This is how stuff like Jamestown happens. Because someone says something because they're linked with God, right? So when they say something, it's actually coming from God. And it may not have an understanding to you, but you need to have implicit trust and Do it regardless, even if you don't understand why. Because love believes all things. That is how you get to Jamestown and Heaven's Gate. That is how. Let's move on to the next example. This one comes from Allow No Place for the Devil. This is from the Watchtower, 1986. Finally, we might consider what the Society has published in the past on chronology. Some opposers claim that Jehovah's Witnesses are false prophets. Those opponents say that the dates have been set, but nothing has happened. Again, we ask, what is the motive of these critics? Are they encouraging wakefulness on the part of God's people? Or are they, rather, trying to justify themselves from falling back into sleepy inactivity? Notice that they don't address the problem. When it says these opponents say that the dates have been set but nothing has changed. Notice they don't address that. They then ask, what is the motive for you asking that question? What's their motive? Are they trying to increase wakefulness to you? Or are they just justifying why they don't do it anymore? No, it's because we believe in truth. We want to actively believe in truth. And the Jehovah's Witnesses, we need to do a video on the amount of times that Jehovah's Witnesses have given prophecies and how that it's fallen through. And their 1914 date for Armageddon is the big one. Like now, Jehovah's Witnesses are taught that 1914 was the year that Jesus took reign in heaven and cast the devil out. But that's not originally what it was. 1914 was supposed to be Armageddon, and it didn't happen. And then it was moved, and then it was moved, and then it was moved, and nothing happened. So they keep having to wallpaper over all of their own stuff. The Harp of God is a perfect example of a book that Jehovah's Witnesses have wallpapered over. That's a whole nother video. Our next example, we're going to go to Exposing the Devil's Subtle Designs. This is from the Watchtower, 1983. So we're going to read the whole thing, just so we can have context for the end here. From the very outset of his rebellion, Satan called into question God's way of doing things. He promoted independent thinking. You can decide for yourself which is good or bad, Satan told Eve. You don't have to listen to God. He is not really telling you the truth. Well, that's not what the scripture actually says. That's what they're saying it says. To this day, it has been Satan's subtle design to infect God's people with this type of thinking. This was always kind of weird. But when God says that in your day of eating the fruit, you will absolutely die, and Satan says that you won't, technically Satan was right. They didn't die. They did not die that day. It was decades later that they died. They had grown old. They had 2 kids. Let's keep going. How is such independent thinking manifested? A common way is by questioning the counsel that is provided by God's visible organization. For example, God's organization has, from time to time, given warnings about listening to certain types of immoral and suggestive music, and about frequenting discos and other types of worldly dance halls where such music is played and people are known to engage in immoral conduct. Stinking discos, man. Yet certain ones have professed to know better. They have rebelled against such counsel and have done what is right in their own eyes. With what result? Very often they have become involved in sexual immorality and have suffered severe spiritual harm. But even if they have not been so affected, are they not reprehensible if others follow their example and suffer bad consequences? Once again, you need to follow God's organization. Don't think about it. Don't use your thoughts. Use the thoughts that we're giving you. We're warning you. And wouldn't you know it, some people didn't listen to it and they fell right into these horrific situations. And then our last example here is from They Keep Following the Lamb. This is from the Watchtower 2009. Just very short one. It says, since Jehovah God and Jesus Christ completely trust the faithful and discreet slave, should we not do the same? After all, the slave has shown itself to be faithful in doing its assigned work. And then, for example, the Watchtower, blah, 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 blah. Like we all understand that the faithful and discreet slave, which is they're talking about the governing body here, and the slave has shown itself being faithful in doing assigned work. Yes, but there's been no proof that they have a direct line to God. That's the problem, because they keep screwing up. they keep screwing up, it's hard to believe that they have a direct connection to God. Let's go on to 10 here. Labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful. Real easy example of that is remaining organized for survival into the millennium. This is from The Watchtower, 1989. Only Jehovah's Witnesses, those of the anointed remnant and the great crowd, as a united organization under the protection of the supreme organizer, have any scriptural hope of surviving the impending end of this doomed system dominated by Satan the devil. Boy, there is a lot of fear in that one. There's a lot of fear in that one. And it goes to show that, yet again, it is only the Jehovah's Witnesses. They are the only ones who have any hope of living through. No one else does. No other belief system, no other religion, no other anything. Only Jehovah's Witnesses. And then number 11 here, instill the new map of reality. We kind of talked about that towards the beginning. That is something that you're quizzed on. So before you are baptized, you have to be questioned by an elder. So an elder will go through questions that they have to ask you and your response to them. After, I believe it's 3 meetings, if I'm not wrong. I'm pretty sure it was 3. It's 2 or 3, something like that. If all of your answers are satisfactory, then you're allowed to get baptized. And a lot of that is to make sure that you have this, a lot of the, especially on the second, especially on like the second or third, they really dive into this map of reality on what's going to happen to make sure that you got it where you can explain it to other people. And only then you can get baptized. At this point, I would like to go over some resources. Thought control is very dangerous. It is. And we see very clearly that the Jehovah's Witnesses do engage. They do, in fact, engage in thought control. And I want to give a couple of websites for people that are trying to get out of Jehovah's Witnesses or any other high control group. And the first resource that I'd like to direct people to is Dare to Doubt. These are some good folks that can help you with religious trauma. They have a little section here for crisis care, even LGBTQ+, access to mental health, those kind of things. This is a good resource. The other good resource that I want to bring up is Recovering from Religion. They have a ton of resources if you want to do research on your own when you're questioning. An infinite amount of resources on a ton of topics and religions. As you see, there's a little bubble there in the lower left-hand corner. You can chat with somebody and they can help walk you through, or just listen. Even if you just need someone to listen to, you can do that. You can call. If you're going to call, I would suggest doing a scheduled call. That's probably better. But this is another fantastic resource that I would encourage people to reach out to. They also have an online community. If you know anything about Discord, it's like Discord. You can go into different channels. If you want to talk to other people that are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, this is a great place to start building a community, because when you leave the Jehovah's Witnesses, one of the things you lose is your entire social circle, and your sense of community is gone overnight. And Recovering from Religion is a wonderful place to start. So I would really encourage people to reach out and give Recovering from Religion a try, because I think you'll have a good experience. So that's it for this video, guys. I really appreciate if you made it to this point. Please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment, engage with the video, and because I'm going to be continuing doing these on a weekly basis. In my full-time job, I do have some changes coming up, but I'm going to do my best to continue on making a new video and releasing it every Sunday. Again, thank you for watching the video, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.